And it's great to be here and to thank you, Bert, for inviting me, and finally we're making this happen. And we're going to be doing a three-part on tzedakah. So I'm open if people, I have some major topics I want to look at. The one we're going to sort of start with today is going to be seeing the basic structures, systems of tzedakah in the Torah, and particularly the idea of lending money, which, as you will see, is much more dominant in the Torah than the idea of what we call tzedakah, of like a gift of money, gifting property. And then we'll be looking at, and then on a different time, we'll look at the issue about Maaser Ksafim, about the whole tithing and where that came from in different halachic structures and guidelines around that. But I do want to be also responsive if people have a particular area, there's still some flexibility in terms of how we're going to shape these three. But I do want to start with looking at this issue of the systems in the Torah for, let's call it, providing for the poor. Okay, and if I asked you, what were the ways in the Torah in which you think that the community provided for the poor? What are some of the things that come most immediately to mind in terms of that? And people should just, jump in. I assume this is interactive, right? Yes. Leket, right?
Pay,
exactly. Right. So when the crops are being harvested, if you leave behind accidentally a sheaf, if there are natural things that drop when you're gathering up the sheaf, some things are going to fall and slip through. You intentionally leave a corner. There are parts that are left for the poor to come and collect from. And of course, I think that the most graphic image of that and description of that is in Megillat Ruth, where you actually see somebody's going and collecting, and it's clear that there's a system that these people are expected, and the field workers sort of handle them and know about them and so on. Okay, so that's one major area. What else?
Then there's maestros, particularly Maaser Ani, but I interpret, Maaser Rishon and Maaser Sheni as tzedakah as well.
Right. So let's talk about the various, tithing or gifts from the produce that are given, and discuss the key question here is how much are they about giving to God or giving to people that work in the religious field, Kohanim, and how much are they about providing for the poor? So there's some actually that relate to animals we won't talk about, but anyway, but here, so there's bikurim, the first fruit, right? And the bikurim is a sense clearly about recognizing gratitude to God. You take those bikurim and you bring them to the Beit HaMikdash and you say, Arami Oved Avi, the thing we say in the Haggadah, that we were wandering and we went to Egypt and God took us out and then brought us to this land. That's the part we don't say in the Haggadah. God brought us to this land, and now I am bringing from the first fruit of my land to thank God, thanking God. It's recognition for all God has done for you, that now you actually have a land you can call your own, a country you can call your own property, that anchors you and that has produced this fruit, and you give that. That's bikurim. Then
okay.
you go. Yes.
Can you please tell us why that's included in tzedakah?
Well, it's not. Right now, I am looking at the range of types of agricultural gifts and identifying which are or are not what we would call tzedakah. So that actually is in the not category. Okay, right. That is a gift that is given, but it is about thanks to God and brought to the temple, and it's not about tzedakah. Thank you for clarifying. Now we talk about truma, right? So truma is when you go ahead and after you harvest the grain or the fruit or whatever, you take a certain amount as a gift to the Kohen. And this can be even a tiny amount. The rabbi set it at about 2%. Now, again here, this does not seem at all to be about providing for the poor. It might be a type of other thing we call tzedakah, which is, giving to religious causes. It is providing for the Kohanim who work in the Beit HaMikdash, but it is not because the Kohanim are being conceptualized as being poor and they need our support, right? It's the Torah says "Chelaf avodasam ba'oel asher heim ovdim ba'oel moed," in exchange for the work that they are doing. So truma can be thought of in one or two ways. I'll write this up in a minute. Truma can be thought of as similar to bikurim. It is the first thing I give to God, truma laHashem. And how do I give it to God? Well, one way to give it to God is you give it to the Kohanim who stand in for God. Another way truma can be thought of is the Kohanim represent me in the Beis HaMikdash. They're the rabbis and our yeshivot and all those religious functionaries, and therefore they are given this because of their religious function that they're doing. But it's still not about providing for the poor. So those are the first two. Let's start writing this up. I like writing on a blank sheet of paper. I know there are fancy things that you can do on the web, but I'm just an old-fashioned guy. So but I'm also a visual, so let's start writing this, okay? So here are the range of, we're talking right now about agricultural. So yeah, we're going to make 2 columns. We'll make a table. Okay, this is about God other, and this is about Tzedakah poor. Okay, those will be our 2 columns.
Just to be clear, though, we are not, Tzedakah is not necessarily limited just to the poor.
Right, that is true. Tzedakah could be, by the way, if anybody wants to make a donation to YCT, I'll put the address in the chat box. Tzedakah definitely could be to religious causes as well. But I want to focus specifically on the providing to the poor, okay? But in this, there can be God religious.
So in other words, so therefore, what it would mean is that you are giving to the Kohen to help support the institution of the Beis HaMikdash. So in that sense, that's a third way of looking at, giving the money to
Tzedakah. So you know what? So fine. So Drew, so you have convinced me. We're going to make 3 columns, okay? So hold on. Wait, let me just do it this way.
And part of this, as I was discussing with you before you got online, that I forget her name. There was a woman who wrote a book, a rabbi from either conservative, Jill Jacobs, who wrote a book, and in essence, she claims that the concept of tzedakah only applies to the poor.
Okay, so we'll talk about all of that. Right now, we're not talking about a label. We're just going to talk about various gifts that are given, and whether we label it tzedakah or not. Okay, let's talk about here. We can just talk about this. Let's not use the word tzedakah yet at all. Okay, there's a type of gift that's given as a thanks and gratitude to God. It's not really about a person receiving it. There is a type of gift that is given to those people who are engaged in religious activities to provide for the religious needs of the community, the Kohanim mostly. And then there are things that are for the poor. Okay, so Bikurim clearly falls into this category, okay? You thank God for the land. That's what the Torah says you do. You go to the temple and you thank God for the land, Okay. Bring the food to Beit HaMikdash and thank God for the land. That's what the Torah says about the Bikurim. Now we've got the Truma. So there, the Torah speaks about it in 2 ways. Sometimes it says Truma laHashem, right? LaHashem, I guess write it in Hebrew, which means it's like Bikurim. It's the first thing that you give from your grain, and you recognize that God has given it to you. It's a way of recognizing God, okay? Like Bikurim, but Truma can also exist. Okay, you know what? I just realized. Sorry, everybody. I'm doing this on the fly, as you can see. Let's make it easier like this. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to do it like this. Okay. Okay, so these are the various gifts around the vertical column. Okay, so Truma can fall into this category to God, but it can also fall into, hold on. Okay, but it can also fall into this as what the Torah says about the Kohanim. It's about in exchange for their service. And you have a pasuk that speaks about that as well. Whoops. Chelef avodatam be'ohel moed. Is everybody with me? Is it clear what we're doing here? Is this helpful? Okay. All right. Now, after Truma, you have Maaser. Okay, so you have Maaser Rishon that goes to the Levi. All right, where would you put that Maaser Rishon that goes to the
I
Levi?
guess it's a functionary.
Right, so it could be as a functionary, right? It says Maaser, so here it's because they serve, in the temple, right? But also, if you wanted to, I don't really believe this, but sometimes when the Torah speaks about like the droppings in the field and so on and the payah, it says who comes to collect that? It says, Uva Halevi ki ein lo chelek v'nachala imach. Okay, the Levi has no, as a tribe, no portion of the land. So the Levi could be conceptualized as poor, as landless.
And
Okay,
that also apply to the Kohen as well then?
it could, but the Torah does not really speak about. It's true that it's technically true. The Kohen also doesn't have, but the Kohen gets all the food and the meat and the sacrifice. Kohen gets lots of gifts, and the Torah never conceptualizes the Kohen as somebody in the needy category. But the Levi is conceptualized in places of the Torah in the needy category. The Levi does not have an portion, and he will come, and sometimes he's included with the orphan and the widow and the poor. So they are a tribe that is like, the Kohanim get if you want, they have the nice prestigious jobs. They're the senior rabbis of major synagogues and so on. And the Leviim are all of like the Malamdim out there, that struggle to get by. But anyway, the Torah does conceptualize the Levi as poor, although usually not in the context of talking about Maaser Rishon, usually in the context of talking about gifts to the poor. Okay, so Maaser Rishon, even though Levi can be conceptualized like this, I'm hesitant to say that that's what Maaser Rishon is about. Okay, that's the first tithe that is given to the Levi. Then you get to Maaser Sheni. That's given in years 1, 2, 4, and 6 of the Shemitah cycle. Okay.
How about Maaser Rishon? Could you put them when they're given to, please?
Oh, every year.
Okay.
Every year. Okay. So Maaser Sheni, what do you do with Maaser Sheni? Does anybody know what you do with Maaser Sheni? You bring it to the Beis HaMikdash and you eat it. You eat it. Okay, so you're not giving it to anyone, but you eat it in the presence of God. Okay, so the pasuk, so that is about, going to God, connecting to God. Okay, and you eat it. It says like, I think the pasuk there is v'samachta lifnei Hashem Elokecha. Right, b'chom asher yadecha, b'makom asher yivchar, b'chom, whatever, b'makom asher yivchar. Okay, so that is also about thanks to God, said in a little different way. It's maybe not so much about thanks, but it's about ensuring that we have a certain encounter with God, that we, on a periodic basis. I know somebody actually who converted from Christianity to Judaism, and she was talking to me about her practice. She was a frum Christian, and she was talking to me about her practice, and she said, they looked in the Torah and they saw about the tithes, so the first tithe and the second tithe. So the first tithe, like Levi or whatever, that they gave, to religious causes. The second one, they used that money to go on every year on a type of a religious pilgrimage, to actually visit a site of religious significance. So that I love it, because that's exactly what the Torah is sort of saying, except that's not, the Torah doesn't say you use it to pay for your airfare and for your lodging, but the idea is like you go and you now why do you need that if you also go during the regalim is an interesting question, okay, but maybe this you can decide on the timing of it, could be a little bit more fit, it's something more that sort of is a little more personal and communal. But that is clearly not about giving to the Kohanim or giving to the poor. That is about you and God and the Beis HaMikdash. Now we finally get to Maaser Ani, which is only in years, well, it's supposed to be Ani, whatever, Ani, yes, whatever. It's not Ani like me. Anyway, that's in years 3 and, oh wait, I miswrote this. This is 5 and 6. No, this is 4 and 5. Excuse me, I miswrote this, 4 and 5. Okay, Maaser Ani is in years 3 and 6 of Shemitah. So it is only 2/7 of the time, and that clearly is to give to the poor. Okay, give to the poor. So that's clearly what the Torah says that it's about. It's about you shall give to the poor, to the orphan, to the widow, and so on. So if we were to look at this chart here and say, the idea, the general types of regular tithing and gifts that occur from the grain and from the produce and so on, there is not much that falls into traditional tzedakah of providing for the poor. Maaser Rishon, maybe, arguably, really what you have is Maaser Ani, which is two out of 7 years. The Aniyim cannot survive on 2 out of 7 years. So clearly, this is not the primary structure that the Torah has for providing for the poor. You do have more of a basis of the tzedakah idea of giving to religious causes, through Truma and Maaser Rishon. But in terms of giving to the poor, this is not doing the job. Okay, and that gets us, therefore, to what is called the Matnos Aniyim, the gifts of the poor. That's how Rambam calls it. Gifts to the poor is basically, that is leket, shikha, and peah. Leket, shikha, and peah. Leket is the droppings, when things accidentally drop when you're harvesting. Shikha is you actually forgot a whole sheaf. And peah is you intentionally leave a corner. So those are the real ways on an ongoing basis that the Torah talks about providing for the poor, and those are very regular in the Torah. So that is, if you want to think about the core paradigm and model that we have, it is not Maaser. It is leket, shikha, and peah, at least when we're dealing with tzedakah as it relates to the poor. Now, I want to talk about gifts of money in a minute. That's going to be the shift here. But let's pause for a moment and talk about, well, let me posit this. I'm going to posit and then later demonstrate that the Torah does not have an idea of giving money to the poor. That when the poor person comes with their hands out, the Torah does not talk about giving them a gift of money. We'll see about that in a minute. So for the moment, let's assume that that is not in the Torah, or it's certainly not significant in the Torah. That what is significant in the Torah of providing for the poor is leket, shikha, and peah. Why do you think that might be a preferred model of providing for the poor than the person coming and me going into my wallet and giving them a $10 bill or a $20 bill, if I'm being generous? Okay, why would this be better than a gift of money? Why do you think it might be? Go ahead, just speak up. I can't see everybody's hand.
Less shame in it. There's less shame in it.
Why? In what way is there less shame?
Because you're not identifying who the poor person is.
So the poor person doesn't have to go and encounter the face of another person and recognize their weaker, their needy position to that person. You've got this huge field, maybe your workers are going to see me like Ruth when I go to collect, but they're also just workers. They're not the owners of the field. And, and I'm not directly encountering somebody and saying, please give me money, right? So absolutely. So it provides dignity. It doesn't put me in this needy begging position. Like I don't have to encounter the person who's giving it. Yes.
Isaac, go
ahead. What?
A gift also. A gift is something, something of a particular item. Whereas otherwise, we want something that's of a continuity. We want something that will have a continuing effect on the person, not just an immediate. Here's a gift, and then you're not part of this continuity of Judaism.
And how does leket, shikha, and peah create continuity?
Well, a continuity would be something that evolves, something that develops, not just here's $10, here's a bag of food. You want somebody who, in getting whatever it is, feels a part of the Jewish people and will continue to be a Jewish person.
So maybe the word more we're talking about is community than continuity, right?
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That's right. So when I go into the field, right? Tell me if this is what you're talking about, Ruby. Because
hey guys, you got to be a little more quiet.
Okay, people, put yourself on mute when you're not talking, please. Okay. when I go into the field, if you read the story of Ruth, to me, what is powerful when you're reading that story, Isaac, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm getting back to you. Okay. When you read that story it's like everybody is doing this. This is what has happened during this time, is that the poor are spreading out and they're collecting, and you don't feel ashamed because you're part of the class of the poor, but you're doing it with hundreds of other people, right? And there's something about, and the whole, everybody who has fields is, also living up to their responsibility, letting it happen, leaving the corner. So it's a sort of a communal type of an experience rather than an individual one of me all on my lonesome having to go to you as an individual. So I think, is that what you were sort of getting at, Ruby? I can't hear you.
Yes, that is my thinking.
Okay, great. All right, Isaac, what do you want to say?
I think that the lekachif and pay is a more direct, it says direct expression of giving and taking, that there doesn't have to be a money transaction or any other transaction. It addresses the need of the poor in the most direct fashion. I'm assuming that hunger or need for food is about the most direct thing that you could do as far as charity, I think.
Okay, so it immediately takes care of their needs in a way that money, can maybe go to other types of causes. So it sort of directly takes care of everything. Although we should admit that it probably is easier for me to take $10 and go to a store and buy a sandwich than to take a whole bushel of wheat and turn it into food. So, but there is something about the fact that it speaks towards the necessities. It does speak in a powerful way towards the necessities. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so the fact that it's food is it speaks towards the sort of, the sense of the sort of the basic human needs and et cetera. Okay. So those are great. I would add one more, unless somebody else wants to add something. Any other suggestions?
Yes. I wanted to say that also they're making an effort. They have to work in order to complete.
Excellent. I'm so glad you said it and I didn't have to. Okay. The poor work for their food. Okay. They have to go, they make an effort. They go, they collect. In a way, they clean up the field. I mean, okay, the owner might want it cleaned up and to keep the little stuff that's left over, but they harvest by the paya. They actually have to take a sickle and harvest it. Okay, so they actually make an effort. And I think this idea, some people might know, Rambam in his list of hierarchies of tzedakah speaks about the power of giving somebody a job over giving them money. Right. And the job is not only because it's like ongoing and it produces money on an ongoing basis, but the dignity that comes with it, that working for your labor and so on. And, being a producer of society, feeling that what you got came through your effort and not that you were just totally subservient and it was given to you. So I think this is very powerful. What I will also say is, and, not to overstate it, but, the way in which if I can go and actually enter into your field with my sickle and harvest the paya, I think that there's particularly, particularly around paya, but I have entry into your field. It's not like you're the rich person with all these fields. I'm not allowed on your property, and I never can actually engage in that enterprise. No, actually, I go into your field and I pick up grain and I'm okay. It's not my own field, but I go into the field and I leave with grain, which is sort of like something like what an owner does. And I go in and I actually harvest, right? There's more of a sense of, of like greater, like being of the productive class of society and more connected to the land. So, it allows for a connection to the land, to the, productive, member of society, etc. Okay. So,
And that-
I have a question. and
yes.
I can test some of this.
Okay, please.
Okay. So I wasn't under the understanding understanding is that they actually go and a piece of the land is kept so they could actually harvest it and work it?
Yes, that's
Okay.
Peah.
Okay, because I was thinking that as a community, it labels you, all of you are going into this field and labeling you as the poor, you know.
Right, that is true. That is true.
And
I
it's
mean, it
almost
might not
like,
always be
it's
immediate.
almost like, you know, in a class, you know, who didn't do well on exam, all
Right.
stand up, kind of, you
Right.
know? So,
Right. There is no getting around that. But I think at the individual level, you're more protected when you're going in with a lot of other people. And there are also workers who enter the field that are not the poor. So yeah, but that is true. Clearly you are of the poor class of society. You know, there is no escaping that. That is true.
But
Yeah.
you were talking about, this is Bert, about Shemitah, in essence, levels everybody in terms of you know, who owns property and doesn't, because everybody is free to use the land.
Right. So that is true. I do not want to talk right now about Shemitah, just because, you know, that's like a whole other discussion. Shemitah and what's the purpose of Shemitah? But yes, definitely Shemitah can. Whoops, sorry, I'm trying to just make this. Definitely Shemitah can be. I'm just doing this so people see what each one of these. Shemitah can also be connected to this as well. That is true. Leket is when you drop, you know, droppings like of fruit and grain that the poor are allowed to pick up. Keep. Owner cannot go back for them. Shikha is, sorry. Anyway, whatever. Okay, sorry. All right, hold on. Okay, shikha is when owner or workers forgot a sheaf
Right.
in the field. You know, the poor can go and take it. Owner cannot retrieve. And Peah is corner of the field left unharvested. Or can go in. Okay. All right. So those are and the sort of the benefits are as we've been saying. These are the benefits of doing it that way. So yes, so what I wanted to say about the working for the food. It's interesting sometimes, like similar to that other thing I said to you about that woman who converted. I was once at a also, I forget, some conference, and there was a person there, also Christian, a pastor, I think, who started this whole, charity, whatever, or organization to provide for the poor. But what he did was, it was about, finding opportunities for them to work. And to work and to provide for themselves that way. And he said he learned this from the Torah, from the fact of leket shechepeah. Maybe most, that why is the Torah saying that that's how they're provided for? Because of the power of what it means that you actually are not in this like just begging, receiving mode. You actually are going out there, engaging, the land, engaging society, and through some effort, you're bringing stuff home, and the power that has in terms of the human dignity element. Okay, so I think now we get a clearer picture of why the idea of a straight gift to the poor was not necessarily the thing to be focused on in an agricultural society in which everybody had fields. This took place, regularly and so on, all over at the same time, and therefore was a way to provide for everyone, and with real dignity and with all of what we discussed, and a communal way. What happens is that we will get to classic tzedakah in a little bit, but what happens is that society shifts from an agricultural society to a more of a commercial society, and people aren't, and also most of the Jewish community isn't living in Israel, and these obligations are only in Israel. So other sort of systems have to be created. Now, one obvious system is the personal tzedakah, what we call tzedakah. The poor sticks out their hand and you give them, and we'll get to that. But I want to prod you to think about something you might be aware of that existed within Jewish communities as a more of a communal way to provide for the poor. Does anybody know what that might have been in the past, a communal way to provide for the poor?
They would collect
Yes.
before Pesach, they would collect money for foods, and then everybody had to give
Right.
if they
Right.
had the money to give, and
So
then
there
they would distribute it.
Excellent. So there's most chitim specifically before Pesach, because Pesach is an expensive holiday and so on. But I want to get back to what you said before you got to most chitim, and that was later. But already in Mishnaic times, you have what's called the ka'ara and the tamchui. And the ka'ara and the tamchui are essentially soup kitchens. And that basically what you would do is you would go, there would be somebody who would be appointed by each town, each community, to go around to all the homeowners and to collect food on a daily basis and to basically provide for people a daily type of a soup kitchen. And then also, there would be something that would be like somebody could have a one-time donation of food to provide for them for the week. Now, this, interestingly, where this institution is mentioned is in the Mishnah at the end of Tractate Peah. Okay, so it doesn't make the connection, but it is exactly in my mind saying, what are we going to do to substitute for these agricultural gifts? Well, we don't have the working in the land exactly in the same way, but so maybe they didn't have like a system of providing work. But the aspect that was mentioned here about the food, the aspect that was mentioned about the communal, okay, the fact that you didn't have to come and say and put yourself at the whim of the giver, but that it was provided for you. So, you do still have to show up and stand in line at the soup kitchen, right? And I don't know, for people who have ever, been at a soup kitchen, or if you're sometimes in the city at certain times of the day, you'll see a whole line of people lined up in front of a church, and they're waiting for it to open, and because they provide daily meals. So, again, there is something about the fact that you're not doing it alone, but getting back to the point that was made before, there also something that it is public, and people are seeing you line up. So it's not a perfect solution, okay? But it does manage to, to mean you don't have to hope for our goodwill. We're going to provide it. It's going to be something basic. It's going to be food, and it's going to be communal, and it's going to be a communal responsibility towards the poor. So that institution is, I think, very key, and one that, again, I'm not sure how much we have in our contemporary phenomenon. Like, people might give to the rabbi's tzedakah fund and then trust the rabbi becomes like the gabbai and trust the rabbi to make decisions about, distributing it. But I do want to, I want to first read the Mishnah inside and show you the Mishnah. And then I want to pause and hear your reflection about whether we actually do have successfully embraced the idea of communal responsibility, because we might have some surrogates like the what's it called, the federation and other types of things, but I do think that we have lost out a bit on that sense of communal responsibility, and I want to hear your thoughts. But let's first start by looking at the Mishnah around the Tamchui. So I'm going to just pull it up here. Give me a minute. Let's try Sfaria and see if we can do it that way, if it has English for us. Okay, Mishnah. Can people see my screen that I'm in Sfaria, or no? Do I have to do another?
No, I can't.
Okay.
No, can't.
Let me do another one then. Okay, so this is the last. There it is. Yeah, this is the last parak in Peah, and if you go to the end, all of this is about Peah. And now you have the very end of the last tractate that deals with gifts to the poor, the following. Ain posting ani over mi makom lamakom mikika punyan. I'll just read it in English. They may not give without any introduction, like the Mishnah just starts talking about this. They may not give a poor person wandering from place to place less than a loaf worth a pundion at a time when 4 seahs will cost 1 selah. So don't worry about the math. Okay, but here you have an itinerant poor person. He's not a member of the town. We have a responsibility to that person as well. Poor person comes to town. So therefore, any poor person that happens to be here, we communally have to provide for him a loaf of bread of a certain size. If he spends the night at a place, they must give him the cost of what he needs for the night. If he stays over Shabbat, they must give him enough food for 3 meals. He who has money for 2 meals may not take anything from the charity dish, okay? That is the tamchoy. That is the daily soup kitchen. And if he has enough money for 14 meals a week, he may not take any support from the communal fund. So somebody might not be day to day. Somebody might have enough food to provide for him on a daily basis, but they don't have enough to provide for the whole week, and to give that person a sense of security. It's not like, just come back, we're just going to provide for you daily. No, somebody, if, you can also, there's a sense of providing funds so somebody feels that they can make it through the week, not just make it through the week. The communal fund is collected by, not just the day, it's collected by 2 and distributed by 3 people, because you need, but again, it speaks about this communal fund, and then it goes on to more of, let me just see if there's anything else worth looking at here. And then there's some nice, whatever. Okay, fine, we won't bother reading this. So what I want you to see there is, right there at the end of the tractate dealing with the agricultural gifts, without any introduction, the Mishnah just moves into the idea of, here's how we provide communally for our poor. We have, and it's not just the poor of the city, it's even the poor that are passing through. It's collected communally, it's distributed by communal officers. There's one way which we provide for them daily, there's one way we provide for them weekly, and so on. And I think that is really significant to see how we try to live up to the spirit of the agricultural gifts when we did not have an agricultural society and live in Israel. And I see there's a hand up, so I'll take the hand first, and then I want to hear your thoughts about whether you think that we actually are able nowadays own this as a communal responsibility. Lance, what do you want to say?
I have a question. Why are these commandments negative? And in the Torah, are the commandments that God gives to the donor positive or negative?
Right. So in the Torah, the giving of the tithe is all positive. You shall give this tithe. The agricultural gifts are both negative and positive because the payah is a positive, like leave the corner. The thing about the forgotten sheaf or the droppings, you can't say, we're commanding you to forget something, or we're commanding you to accidentally drop something. So the first move the Torah has to say is, don't go back. If you forgot it, or if you dropped it, don't go back to collect it. But then it says, after it says, don't go back, it says, le'ani v'lager ta'azovoto. Don't go back to collect it, leave it for the poor. Now, the way you leave it for the poor is passively, is you don't go back and collect it. But the Torah does go out of its way, responding to, I think, what you're asking, to frame it in the positive. Don't collect it, leave it. What you are doing by being passive and not collecting it is you are doing an active mitzvah of giving to the poor, of leaving it to the poor. So that's in the Torah. Here, it's an interesting point you raise about the soup kitchen, why this rabbinic institution, why it was framed in the negative. Why did it not start by saying, we must give to, everybody must contribute to the soup kitchen. We must give this amount. Why does it say don't give less? A little part of me, I would open the question up to everybody here. A little part of me thinks that if you assume there's somewhat of more of a power if you assume it's already happening and saying you can't fall below something, because then saying you have to do it, which sort of assumes that right now you're not doing it. right? So if I just say, okay, we're all doing the soup kitchen, but remember, you can't give less than this, and you can't, and you have to make sure you give that, and you can't do less than that. That just the fact that we have this institution and that people contribute it is not up for discussion. That's the taken for granted point of departure. So that might be why it starts with the negatives rather than the positives, but I do appreciate the question.
May I just ask another question?
Yes.
I've seen your moment. Oh yes, I got it. What are the commandments to the poor, to the recipients?
There really aren't. I mean, in this Mishnah about the soup kitchen, they're sort of like, you as a poor person are not allowed to go and take from the soup kitchen if you have a certain income and so on. But in terms of the Torah, I don't think that there are any commandments directed towards the poor. I'm wondering what commandment you might expect to have seen in terms of that. Would it have been like, you're not allowed to take under these circumstances, only if you're so much poor and not that much poor?
Well, what about some kind of reciprocity?
Oh, I see. I think that, I think that the reciprocity, I mean, I think it's hard enough on the poor, and you as the poor shall praise the person who gives it to you. Thank God for give your blessings to the person or something of that. It's an interesting question. I think that, the poor are too often feel like they're at the whim and, in the debt of others, that might be like a hard ask, in sense of like reinforcing that dependency. But I don't know. It's an interesting question.
May I just start one thing, and that
Yes.
is, I'm very impressed with your responses. I think they're excellent. And also, I read your column every Friday.
Thank you. My parsha. Good. I'm glad.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I wanted to mention.
I think I'll get to you. Yeah, go ahead, David.
When I give to people on the street here in Manhattan,
Yeah.
the majority of the people say, "God bless you."
Right.
Right.
And I think God bless you is so much better than thank you, because I think, and that gets to Lance's point about something that the poor can give, right? I mean, thanks is giving something, but thanks is a way of expressing indebtedness and gratitude and dependency almost, right? Whereas God bless you is they can give you a blessing, right? So I really think that's a powerful point. And maybe it's not something that should be commanded, but I think to note that there's a reciprocity and it's an empowerment when they're able to give you something. Right. I think is a really, really important point.
Rav Linzer, could I
Isaac had his hand up. I'm sorry.
First,
Okay, Tova, but Isaac do you want to just respond immediately to that? Because Isaac did have his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond that there's a certain theory of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the need for food. So it's almost like when someone is sick and you're taking care of them, you don't expect them to, sometimes they're so in their sickness and in the stage that they're at, that they're not capable. They're more self-indulged because of the state that they're in.
Right.
So therefore, I would not expect someone to reciprocate for me until he gets to the point where he's at a higher level on the hierarchy.
I really appreciate that. I'll share with you, and then Isaac, I will pick on you. I'll share with you, something I saw like a year or so ago when I happened to be in a shul in Maryland, which is that there's a statement in the Gemara that if somebody prays for another person, well, if you're sick and you pray for another person, God will actually respond more quickly to your needs. So somebody started this organization that I think it's called like yad liyad, like hand to hand or whatever, but basically it matches up people with similar illnesses. So if one person is dealing with, colon cancer, it matches them up with another person with colon cancer and they pray for one another. And I was like, oh my God, I was like so moved by that because like it takes you out of your own, self-absorption in your illness, which could be, and it allows you to care for someone else and give what you can give to that someone else, right? That prayer for somebody else. So anyway, so I really do appreciate that. Isaac, you've been waiting to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi. I had this discussion with somebody, and it wasn't the first time. It comes up about our obligation for tzedakah for everybody, non-Jews as well as Jews. And,
right.
What is the obligation? And is it this person that I was talking to recently said, well, if we give, it's because to maintain shalom and, between people. And I thought that, the obligation was probably more than that, but I couldn't give him any textual proof. So tell me about it.
Okay, so we will, as they say, put that one in the parking lot. The question about obligation to non-Jews, we will definitely get back to that, right? And what is the nature of that obligation? So, okay, and if I don't remember, you remind me, but that's definitely on my list of things to cover. All right, so now what I do want to do is open it to the question I asked before, and how people think, how would you say we're doing on that question of communal responsibility towards our local poor? Because I feel right now that tzedakah has been very privatized. Maybe sometimes the way the federation operates, if they're going to be doing a drive and they, or maybe there are some shuls which actually try to do some sense of communal, we're raising this. Normally when shuls do drives, it's for like building funds, or I don't know. I know the HIR does have a soup kitchen, but I do wonder how people feel we're doing, how we're at that, in that regards, in terms of a sense of communal responsibility.
This is Bert. Two things before this is ministerial. Could you send me the sheet that you had put together?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and I'll circulate it to everybody. So that's first of all. But secondly, there's a second thing. Isn't there a form of collection of monies in which even the poor have to participate?
So, certainly in the Torah, the idea that everybody, gives a small amount, and yes, there is an importance of, of the poor giving the tzedakah, but it is not, I have to check, it is not this communal soup kitchen. I don't believe that the poor participated, in the communal soup kitchen itself. I'm going to get back to you on that. Okay.
The other thing is what constitutes in terms of giving, and providing, what constitutes a community.
Right.
And
so they used to have much more tight-knit communities, like a clear little Stiebel town or whatever. Right here, maybe our communities are a little more amorphous. In some places, it's all around one shul. Here in Riverdale, we have 5 shuls, and a lot of people are members of all of them or 3 of them. So maybe the idea of community boundaries is also weaker. So I think that's maybe part of it.
And besides that, we have not only the community here, but we also associate our community with our brothers in Israel,
exactly,
as well. So,
and a special responsibility to Israel is also a piece of this as well. They're in tzedakah. Yes, Ruby.
Unless I was involved in some direct communal responsibility involvement, which would be a wonderful thing to do, how would I even be aware of what is happening? How would I personally know what is being given and how it's given and is it done properly? And should I get involved and so forth, so on? It's like, it's a wonderful concept, but that sounds like something very removed from my everyday life.
Right. I mean, because we don't have the system in place, right? I mean, if we sort of said like, like Halacha says, there's actually a Halacha, when you have a Jewish community, they have to have a certain number of institutions. They have to have a school, they have to have a mikvah, and they have to have this kara and tamchui, this soup kitchen, right? That has traditionally been what the responsibilities of a Jewish community are. And then the people who would be appointed, the officers, would make it their business to know who are the poor, what are the needs, how are we going to go around collecting it, right? It's not something that any one of us can do as an individual. If we want to make it a communal responsibility, we have to, take ownership. And I just think that it's worth acknowledging, for whatever reasons, that we don't have that really that much nowadays. And I feel that even if the poor people are provided for through government and, and the Federation and the Rabbi's Discretionary Fund, I feel something is lost when we're not taking ownership and responsibility as a community. I will tell you that, this is not tzedakah, but on a, like, many years ago, and I think there's some people, even before WhatsApp, and this is much easier on WhatsApp, somebody started a Gemach fund, Communal Chesed fund for within this, this was when I was in Boca Raton, which is a very wealthy community. I was there for like 2 years as the Rosh Kollel within Boca Raton. So what do you need a Gemach fund for in Boca Raton? So it's basically, it's like if you needed something, like I need a ladder. Does anybody have an 8-foot ladder? And somebody on this, listserv or this, WhatsApp would say, yeah, I have an 8-foot ladder, right? And then somebody else says, oh, is anybody going? I mean, we do have WhatsApp like this, I know, in Riverdale. Is anybody going here? Can you give me a ride? Can you pick this up? And at least that type of a thing, that wasn't exactly about people that are poor, but that type of a thing was, we are all interconnected and we want to be able to help out one another. And, and that's very powerful when you actually do help out one another, what that does for the sense of community and responsibility and interconnectedness. So I just think that I don't know if this is going to inspire anybody to start something, but I think we should acknowledge that it's something that is rare, and there is something that's lost as a result of that. Okay, so we only have about 3 more minutes. So I guess what I will do, go ahead.
Yeah, the question is, we've talked about people's needs in terms of food, but people have so many other needs. So a big expense is lodging, rent, and that kind of thing. Medical needs, education, all of these things. So how are we going to cover everybody's every need?
So thank you. So that is going to get us to the next sort of discussion, which is going to turn into what we classically think of as tzedakah, which is the giving of money and what that is based on and how that developed, and also connecting it to talking about the issue of loaning money, lending money as well. I will say that in terms of the education, the idea of a public school, was already based on the sense of the need to learn Torah, and everybody should be able to learn Torah. That was started like 2 millennia ago, more than 2 millennia ago, that the sense of that we have to have, every community has to have a public school, that does not address the question about the lodging issue. And yes, and healthcare, and there's a lot of other things more than food. So you're right, this is the start. It's not the totality. Tova, yes.
To say that there's a lot of things in this community that help people. I mean, I belong to 3 different synagogues, and in each one of them, there are things that there's, helping hands. There's, if someone needs shiva, there's so many things in the community that that are in place. So I'd like to hear from you. I need to have a better concept of what you mean by we're not doing enough. And, there are people in the community. There's one man that I know that I'm involved with, that, and some other people on this site that needs help. He can't get to the help because he's not of the age. You have to be 60 and above to get the pills from Riverdale Y. So there are so many things that people are doing in this community. So I'd like to have a better understanding of what you mean by there's not enough, or that we're not doing enough.
Right. So I'm sorry if I came across as critical.
No, I don't mean you being critical.
I understand. Yeah. I think I was thinking, and you're right, actually, we just, the Helping Hands is amazing. And it's a much better example than mine about the 8-foot ladder, because this is really helping people in need. There are people who need to be driven to a doctor's appointment. There are people that need, somebody to come and, and Bikur Cholim and Shiva. And I think that we are doing very, very well with those. And those are profound human needs, and we are responding and owning that as a community. So I really appreciate that corrective. I think I was a little hyper focused on the issue of the providing for the poor, and that question of, there are people here that struggle to pay the rent and to put food on the table, and we need to raise the money communally to provide for them. I guess that's an area I haven't seen as much. And if that is happening, then I want to hear about that. But you are right in terms of the personal needs and whatever. I think we're doing that well. Okay.
Rabbi Linzer,
Yeah.
are you going to add the whole, some of it to your chart, as it were, some of this material so that we could actually have it when I circulate it?
Okay, I'll try to put that on afterwards.
I mean, you don't have to put the entirety of it.
I'll put a few bullet points about what we just discussed
about conflict. That would be great.
Okay, and I think that this was wonderful learning, everyone. So I look forward to seeing you back same time next week. Okay.
Thanks for calling.
All right.
Okay, thank you.